Our text today is the Old Testament lesson from the book of Judges. Then all the children of Israel went up and came into the house of God and wept and sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. It is at first not at all clear to us why the children of Israel were so badly beaten on the field of battle. And it must have been even more painfully confusing for them who were beaten. Here they had assembled together as one man, 400,000 strong, armed and combat ready. They marched out in vastly superior numbers. They sounded the war trumpets only when diplomatic negotiations had broken down, and no other recourse was open to them. And above all, their cause was just. A terrible crime had been committed in Gibeah, a city of Benjamin. A crime of sexual perversion, of homosexual savagery, which ended in the torture and the murder of an innocent woman. And everywhere that news carried about that atrocity, men and women were angered and aroused. It wasn't just that the thing happened. It was that the citizens of Gibeon defended it, saw no shame in it, and justified that perversion as their own personal freedom. So, the Benjamites were told to deliver up the criminals for punishment. But they refused to do so out of a mistaken notion of family loyalty and tribal togetherness. Then it would be civil war. And the Benjamites mobilized a military force at their borders to repel their brothers from stepping one foot across. The armies of Israel drew lots before the Lord, who should go first against the Benjamites. And the lot fell to Judah, who was to lead the way. But the fighting men of Judah came back in total disarray, in shock and carrying their wounded. And 22,000 of them never came back at all. That unexpected, stunning defeat sent tremors through the camp of Israel. But they rallied and they regrouped. And on the second day of fighting, 18,000 of their numbers were stricken down to the ground. But what went wrong? Was it overconfidence on their part? Were the fighting men of Benjamin really such superior warriors? The elders of Israel wanted to do the right thing. They knew that if they didn't avenge this crime, they could not long last as a nation. They wouldn't be worth saving as a nation. They tried to do the good and proper thing. But there must have been something wrong with their motive, their spirit, their attitude. They wanted to do the right thing without the faith that they believed that God's blessings were automatic to them, you see, because they were the good guys. And the Benjamites were the bad. That's something for us to remember. In that story St. John told us this morning in his gospel, where these men orchestrated a scene there in the temple court and brought to Jesus a woman seized in adultery, they said. In the very act, they said. And they quoted chapter and verse from the Bible detailing the punishment for adultery. Now, it sounds drastic to us, but it is drastic. The union of male and female in marriage is the place where life comes from, where human life is lived, the place that makes living worth living. That union of male and female in marriage is the closest, most intimate relationship on earth. And every race and people and tribe under the sun, civilized or uncivilized, have got rules guarding and protecting marriage against adultery. So these men were correct and orthodox, but it comes to you as the story unfolds. There's something wrong about their motives and their methods. The way they flung the woman down there at Jesus' feet, the way they humiliated her in front of the gaping eyes of the crowd, the way they captured only her and not her sexual partner, and the way they were using her and the law of God to get at Christ. That scene sticks in our memories of Jesus and the woman standing there encircled by the crowd. That uneven confrontation, the soiled plaything of men in front of his perfect holiness, that captures our attention. For each of us one day shall stand where she stood, as though there is nobody else in the world, just Christ, just I. And my life will be over, finished, and past repair. And everything then will depend upon his verdict of it. Then I, who have judged others, will be judged. Well, not by my standards. Not by your standards, but by God's standards. Then mercy, forgiveness, pardon, compassion shall be to me all that matters. So when we deal with sin and with sinners, and like Israel of old, we must deal with them. We do not deal with that in the abstract, as though we had no part in it, as though we, like God, were somehow above it all. Your sin may be different, may be less extreme than other people's sin, but sin it is. Just the same. And the defeat of Israel brought that home to them so forcefully. They were members of the same frail humanity. They, the good guys, stood on the same ground of judgment before God. And even they, were in desperate need of divine forgiveness. And so Phineas the priest set it down. He did not belittle the fighting men of Israel for cowardice, or their captains and commanders for incompetence. Phinehas did not put the blame on bad weather, obsolete weaponry, inadequate training, unfamiliar terrain. Like the needle of a compass, Phinehas pointed them to God. You cannot fight the battles of God without God, or the good fight of faith without the faith. And that is true in a dozen different things in our lives. We tug with both hands to make ends meet, don't we? Keep house and home together, maintain a marriage, rear the children, do our daily jobs with a measure of decency and honor. And that's all good and right, but whose strength are we drawing upon? In whose spirit are we doing it? And by whose standard are we attempting to do what is right? It's easy for us to decry the sexual perversion so blatant in our land today. But why? Because it's a sin, or because it's dangerous. You could get AIDS or some venereal disease. We complain that these lifestyles of ours are expensive and costly. We do not ask whether they are warped and selfishly wrong. Even the church is adopting the weapons of the world with its political maneuvering and noisy propaganda tactics, with its psychology and strategy and technology that sells light beer and shave lotion. But, says Paul, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but spiritual. And so here, they went in defeat straight to the sanctuary of the Lord. And they were a different people this day, chastened and humble. Gone was their self-confidence and their assurance that certainly God will be on our side. And they wept there, the text tells us. And they fasted there all the day long, tokens of sorrow and penitence before God. And they brought burnt offerings, the blood of God's appointed lamb to atone for their sins, and peace offerings to regain again that fellowship that can be theirs in God. And in an entirely different spirit, they once again asked God for guidance and for direction. And this time a promise was appended to the task before them. Go up against Benjamin, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand. And so it happened. And the rest of this long chapter to the end tells you how it happened. Strategy on both sides, the deployment of troops, and the outcome. The Benjamites couldn't believe their eyes to see Israel coming out to attack them once more. The Benjamites cast all caution to the wind, stormed out of the fortress gate, and pursued the retreating Israelites as before. What they didn't know was, this time the armies of Israel retreated on purpose, drawing them farther and farther away from their home base. Then with the Benjamites in hot pursuit, the strike force hit the unguarded city and set it on fire. And when the Benjamites looked back and saw the flames and billowing smoke, it was too late. It was all over. They were caught in a pincer movement and annihilated. And even their stragglers cut down. This Bible story is good for any one of us that has ever been defeated in the battles of life, which is every one of us. The fields of battle may differ from person to person. For one, it may be a debilitating disease. For another, lonesomeness or some tragic loss. For another, it may be circumstances at work over which you have no control. Or a broken relationship in your own close circle. Defeat is normal in life. It comes to us all. And the Bible tells us we do not have to pretend that everything that happens is good. The army of Israel felt very bad, you know, over the casualty list and the body count and the abject defeat. St. Paul did not welcome that thorn in the flesh, as he called it, but repeatedly prayed for its removal. And who can forget Christ in Gethsemane's garden, agonizing over the cup that could not and that did not go away? Pain is pain. Loss is loss. Defeat is defeat. And we do not have to make believe. For we must have a faith founded on honesty. Defeat usually makes us lose our self-respect. Sometimes makes us despair. But God does not accept that approach from you. Humility, yes. Worthlessness, no. You are not animals with your tails between your legs, but sons and daughters of the Father, infinitely precious to Him, and are not to come before Him as servile slaves. Defeat is never lost in the life of the believer. For we also have forgiveness and healing for our wounds and release from every failure. You see, defeat can become for us a deep hole out of which we mine insights about ourselves and draw up for ourselves strength that we never had before. Defeat may come to us, but remember, from the crucifixion of Christ on Calvary, that God cannot be defeated. If we fail, God is not finished. And if our progress is momentarily stymied by failure, that can well improve for us the most important campaign of all, our soul salvation and our certain entry to our promised rest. Amen.